Khalil Mack, Josh Sweat, Osa Odighizuwa, Milton Williams, the interior offensive line, the interior pass rushers, those guys are going to get paid. Milton Williams, Osa Odighizuwa, Khalil Mack. I think he could still play, Sam. I thought there was a point in his career where it looked like he had lost a step and wasn't as effective. I think he's been a little, he's still solid out there. He's still rejuvenated. And Josh Sweat, had a couple, 2.5 NFL sacks, 3 sacks total in the Super Bowl, probably made himself some money. And like I said yesterday about the defensive line class in the draft, I think the story of this offseason's on the defensive line is going to be, hey, we got to win with 4, the whole deal. So these guys are going to be valued.
Yeah, actually, this is a pretty strong part of the free agent group, I guess. It's not, again, it's not a vintage free agent class, but the defensive line's actually got some options. Maybe again, like, are we just conditioned to this world of like a decade ago where like legitimate high end top 5 players at their position hit free agency on a fairly regular basis and they were the prize every offseason? I don't know if we've just reached a stage now where that just doesn't happen. Like teams don't let those guys hit the market anymore. They're better at keeping them in the building. They're not, most teams are not so squeezed in terms of cap flexibility that they can't keep a guy that they want in their building. So that just doesn't happen as much. But there are some players like so my point is none of them are that 26-year-old second contract looking for the second contract guy that's going to get market resetting money and be the clear superstar of free agency. But there are still some very good players, I think, that particularly in a league where D-line rotation is everything, that you can find somebody to come in, be part of your sort of 7 defensive linemen that are going to get significant snaps and be a very useful player.
Yeah, that's why Milton Williams. You remember a couple years ago, Javon Hargrave hit free agency again. Coming from Philly, hit free agency at like a decent age, right? And so most of free agency is like here's a bunch of guys, late 20s and into their 30s. Oh, look, there's a 26-year-old. That's Milton Williams with the Eagles this year in a league, as we talked a little bit about yesterday. They hit this really bad lull with interior defensive linemen coming out of the draft for a couple of years. I think the market has skyrocketed for that position generally, and there's not a whole lot of supply when it comes to interior pass rushes. Osa Odighizuwa, Milton Williams, I think both of those guys have a chance to make a ton of money this offseason, and they're not like huge names around the NFL, right? This isn't. Remember the 2019 class when all of those guys signed their big deals? That's Dexter Lawrence and Jeffrey Simmons and Christian Wilkins and Ed Oliver. That's all those guys, right? They're all big names. Milton Williams and Osa Odighizuwa might command that type of money because they can rush the passer. Now, this also does coincide with, we talked again yesterday, Daniel Jeremiah saying, hey, he's got 24 starting interior defensive linemen versus 12 last year. There's 24 defensive linemen in the top 100 of the consensus board. I think this is a decent free agent class, a potentially really good to great draft class, and just a good year overall to reshape the defensive line.
Yeah, it is. Both those guys. So you're right. They're kind of a little bit under the radar, a little bit lesser known than, some other defense tackles. On the other hand, they both had pretty good sack seasons, which is usually an indicator that like the NFL will see them in favorable light. Neither of them hit double digits, like the Madubuike season from a year ago, but I think they were 7 and 8 or 8 and 7 respectively. So they shouldn't be exactly completely under the radar.
Yeah, so look, I think a guy like Sweat, I mean, it's tough to like compare Khalil Mack and Josh Sweat. Sweat's also heading into the prime of his career, and Khalil Mack is a little bit toward the end. I don't know what you end up paying for Khalil Mack, but he's the top guy right now at 6 on 33rd. Josh Sweat is right there, but I think Sweat has a chance to maybe make the most money of anybody if he gets out of Philadelphia.
How concerned would you be about signing a defensive lineman coming off that Philadelphia defense just because the strength of that group is the unit, right? It's like, okay, Milton Williams had a pretty good pass rushing year. On the other hand, look what's around him, right? Like how much of that was ensuring that the double team always went to Jalen Carter, was, everyone else is commanding attention as well. Same thing for Sweat. Like Sweat had a really good year, but how much of that is Josh Sweat is typically not going to get double team attention from anyone. And if you suddenly sign him to be like a big time pass rusher, the prize of free agency, the attention is going to swing in his direction a lot more.
My concern with Sweat generally is I think he's always been good, not great. I don't think he's a great pass rusher. I think he's good. I think he's a good run defender. I think he's solid, Sam. And the supply and demand on this one in the free agent market, maybe like again, teams that really want to reshape the defensive line could say, we'll pay big bucks for one guy and we could draft two, in the first 3 rounds and feel really good about changing up front. I don't know if I want to pay Sweat a ton of money. Milton Williams is the type of guy, or Odighizuwa, that I loved as underrated and would love to have on my team as a complimentary pass rusher. But
Right.
that was when I thought I could get him for 10 to 12, 15. I think that gets pushed to 20. I really do. I mean, I think that's where the market's gone at that position. So if for some reason teams don't want to pay that and I could get them for 12 to 14 million, which might seem like a slap in the face, I don't know, compared to others, then I feel better about that. So I think they're all good, not great. And I don't want to pay great type of money. Whereas again, that 2019 interior defensive line class, I think all of them deserve to get paid what they got paid. Lawrence, Simmons, Oliver, Wilkins, all those guys. I think they're better overall players. Where I think Williams was like a tweener coming out, edge, interior. He's become a very good player, but I don't know if I want to pay the huge money for those types of guys.
But this is kind of back to like, again, there's so much camp space out there. Like we talked about this yesterday, right? The things you're interested in seeing, the money's got to go somewhere. So, okay, the top 2 camp teams in the NFL, the Patriots and the Raiders, they're potentially not in this market, but the Cardinals, for example, right? They're a team whose defensive line read like a preseason game, right? When you're looking at the bodies that they're putting out there, the Cardinals could be interested in a player like that. They have the space. So, yeah, sure, theoretically, you don't want to be paying Milton Williams or Odighizuwa $25 million a year. On the other hand, you have the money to spend, and that's like that. Those are the free agents available this year. So you might just end up paying that. Like suddenly Milton Williams is getting Jeffrey Simmons money, and you're like, yeah, obviously that doesn't make sense in isolation, but from a market standpoint, it might.
Other names to watch here. One of my second tier players that I would keep an eye on, Levi Onwuzurike from the Lions. You told me there was some new pronunciation on that.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is though. Now it's
during
like,
the playoffs. I'm going with Onwuzurike. Who else? Dante Fowler had an interesting season. I still think he's kind of a rotational guy. And then Dennis the Barbarian Gardeck is a free agent. And so I don't know why he's not on top of the list here.
Right, it's true. The Barbarian. Anytime the Barbarian hits free agency, you got to start throwing the bag at him.
You also have the interesting names like Calais Campbell, who's pushing 40, and every year he's still good. Every year could be his last year, but as the 1 year player, remember we've done this for years. Like, hey, one more year of Dwight Freeney and one more year of James Harrison, and these guys through the years where we say you could just bring them in for 1 year and they could still play late into their career. Calais Campbell, I think, is in that boat right now.
Yeah, look, I mean, Calais Campbell. Anytime I could get him for a year, I'm in. There's a free roster spot for Calais Campbell on my team until the man decides he wants to retire. That's just an in perpetuity type of deal. There's a ton of guys though I think that would be interesting again as just parts of your rotation, assuming the price isn't nuts. There's a lot of these guys who I think the value at this point must have gone down to the point where you'd want to do it. Like Chase Young at this stage. I mean, he was okay this season, pretty solid. Maybe not a bounce back, but like the best we've seen from him in a while. Is Chase Young's value now sufficiently diminished that you just want to bring him in as part of your rotation and keep him there?
He's a 1 year guy.
Constant rolling the dice on it. Marcus Davenport is the new Jason Verrett. constantly.
Yes.
1 year deal for Marcus Davenport. Maybe he'll be healthy 1 year and you'll get high end play out of him. But like, there's a ton of those guys who, like, I would kick the tires on as part of a rotation. Dietrich Wise, you'd bring in for that kind of rotation body as well. Like, there's a lot of those guys.
Yeah, completely agree. I'll take every year. I've liked the Marcus Davenport signings the last couple of years, and they have not worked out whatsoever. Lions took the 1 year flyer on him. Vikings took the 1 year flyer on him. Not great.
What about
I'd do it again.
Right. What about Hassan Reddick, based off the disaster that was both sides of that deal, essentially, the Reddick for Bryce Huff, not a trade, but like swappity do.
That feels like one where how did it end did it end sour in Philly before he went to the Jets? Or did it just
I don't think it ended particularly sour. They just decided.
Right. They just moved on, brought in Bryce Huff. It just didn't work. What if Philly just gets him for like super cheap? It's like, we'll just bring him back. That feels like a move that they would pull off, right? Everyone's kind of upset with Reddick and the way things went with the Jets, and he kind of screwed them over and all this, and the Eagles just kind of get him on the cheap and bring him back in.
Well, that's the thing. Like, what's his value? Like, did he torpedo because his whole thing is like he wanted a new contract. He wanted, to get paid again. The Jets were like, why would we do that? And he was like, well, okay, then I'll sit out. And then eventually, fired his agent. Was it Rosenhaus convinced him to be like, dude, the only way out of this is to actually show up for work. So he came back and, it wasn't exactly a huge factor, but at least showed up for work again. But like, did that completely ruin any value he has, or can he actually get paid again?
No, I think his value's tanked because he demanded a trade, or asked for a trade out of Philly, gets to the Jets, doesn't even sign his contract, barely plays, wants to get paid. I think his value's absolutely tanked. So I don't know if he's willing to be a buy low. The chat asked about Javon Kinlaw. That was one name I was going to mention as well. I've been, former first-round pick. I've been disappointed at him against the run. Like, just don't want him out there playing the run, can't anchor. I mean, he's basically a liability. I like him as a pass rush specialist, though. I think he could, he had a decent year last year rushing the passer. I think he's, again, we're talking players as part of the rotation. I would take the 1 year flyer on Kinlaw as well, that type of player.
And then, again, cut candidates, trade candidates. Like the other side of that, Hassan Reddick swappity do. Bryce Huff was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl after being the big free agent acquisition. That screams this is not a guy that's long for this team. I mean, Bryce Huff, for the last couple of years, was literally the most efficient situational pass rusher in all of football for that Jets defense. There's no way that just evaporated. Like, he didn't just become a garbage player overnight. If I had a hole as a situational pass rusher, I would absolutely be interested in bringing Bryce Huff in and seeing if he can fill that role for me.
I would say the light version of that is Josh Uche. Remember the Chiefs traded for him, which looked like a shrewd move, right? Add him to the rotation. He barely played for the Chiefs or had an impact. He has not been as impactful as Huff through his career, but he's shown enough flashes that, again, you get him into camp and see what happens. I'm with you on Huff, though. Love that as a potential buy low option.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.